Hello, this is Pierce Jackson. This is my food vlog for how to make a cottage pie. Right now I'm just chopping up the potatoes. Cottage pies originated in the UK, which my host study, London, is located in. The term cottage pie was first used in 1791 when the potato started to become an affordable, edible, everyday crop in the UK. Cottage pies were traditionally made with leftover roasted meat, either beef or mutton, with mashed potatoes as a convenient pie crust. The ingredients I used was 1.5 teaspoons of olive oil, 2 garlic cloves, onion, carrot, and celery finely chopped, ground beef, 1/4 a cup of flour, in this case oat flour, 1/4 a cup of tomato paste, beef broth, water, Worcester sauce, dried thyme, dried bay leaves, and salt and pepper. I just dumped the olive oil in the pan. The next thing I'm going to do is put the onion and the garlic cloves in and let it sit for 1 minute. I honestly chose this dish because I really like shepherd's pie and I've never tried cottage pie, so when I found out about it, I knew I wanted to try and make it. The ingredients were not too hard to find at all. I just got the ingredient list and went to Trader Joe's, and I actually already had most of the stuff on hand. The directions and basic steps of how to make the dish were pretty straightforward, except for the fact that later I would have to rush the cooling process when we get to the potatoes. For the garlic cloves, I put 2 tablespoons in because that was the equivalent amount that was needed for the recipe. I would let it sit for about a minute until I would finally put my carrots and celery in. At this point, I was putting it on medium high and I was going to cook it until it was softened and sweet. It was definitely fun to cook, but to be completely honest, at this point I was kind of scared that the pan would overflow just because I didn't know if it could hold all of the ingredients, but it actually worked out, ending up just fine. So at this point, I'm adding in the beef. The cut was actually really lean. It was like 96.4. And at this point, I'm turning the heat up to high and trying to break up the beef as much as I can. And I'm going to let it wait and brown so it can be nice and tasty. So at this point, I'm putting the salt and pepper in, and I'm actually going to put a lot of different ingredients in. I have to stir the salt and pepper around to make sure that it's good to go. The next ingredient I'm putting in is tomato paste. The tomato paste was kind of hard to get out. It stuck to the container a little bit, so I kind of obsessively tried to scrape all of the little bits out to try to get as much as I can out of it. The next thing I'm going to put in after the tomato paste is the broth. Really just give it some more flavor along with the tomato paste. I could have used red wine to really give it an extra kick, but I decided to go a little bit on the healthier route and use water to just dump it in. It's really important to mix it in and mix it in well because you don't just want ingredients clumping to the middle, obviously. So at this point, I'm dumping in my flour, trying to sprinkle it a little bit, give it a little bit of je ne sais quoi. I know that's not English, that's a French word. Still, Europe, it's in the general vicinity. Alright, so moving on now. I'm spreading around the broth and I'm grabbing the water. Once again, I could have gone with red wine, but I wanted to try to be a little bit healthy, so I decided to go with the water instead. The next sauce I use is Worcestershire. I don't really know how to pronounce it. It's a really common sauce though, but I know it's named after a county or city in the UK, actually, in England. But it made it feel a little bit more authentic, even though that's probably such an American thing to say because it's so common. It's really a universal sauce at this point. But just because of the name, made it feel a little bit cool to use. The next thing I'm going to use is the thyme and the bay leaves. I couldn't figure out why the bay leaves weren't coming out till I realized they were all clumped to the top and I actually had to pull them out. I tried to stir the bay leaves around, but because it was in its leaf form and I didn't really chop it up, I guess, as well as I could have, It didn't really work out. So I'm simmering the meat and stirring it a little bit on medium high. So I cooked it for about 30 minutes, and once it was nice and reduced to a gravy consistency, I'm pouring it in the pan. Once I'm done pouring this in, I just have to let it cool a little bit. I kind of rushed through the process of letting it cool because it's supposed to be overnight, but instead we just had to get the potatoes out and eat it. I was starving at this point. So I spread it out as best as I could throughout the pan and started to focus on the potatoes. Now I'm just draining the potatoes and I'm going to mash them with butter and milk. In the UK, they just refer to it as mash instead of mashed potatoes, which is kind of funny. I would say that the dish was pretty good. Probably could have been better with experience. I'd give it a B. My mom also had some and she said she liked it. I might try to make it again. I definitely think I would order it in London if it was on the menu, just to see how an authentic one would taste. I'm taking out the butter now and adding it to the dried potatoes, and I'm going to begin the process of mashing it, which was actually very hard because usually we do have a masher for potatoes, but I couldn't find it, so I just used this long fork that was kind of weird. It only had 3 prongs. Eventually, with enough mashing and work, I could eventually pour the milk in and hope that it would come out like mashed potatoes, and it actually came out very well. Once I was done with that, I started making kind of little potato ball clumps and putting it on top of the meat that we were working on after it had cooled. So at this point, I'm just finishing up a little bit, and I'm gonna actually attempt spreading it on top of the meat part to try to make it like a pie-like crust. This was actually kind of hard. I didn't really think I would be able to spread it, but it ended up being really good, and it spread way more than I thought it was going to spread, so I was really happy with the result I got from it. So at this point, I baked it for about 25 minutes, and when I was originally pulling it out, I kind of burnt myself a little bit on my left arm. But after that, there was no more burns or injuries, so I was good to go. It would honestly be exciting to eat cottage pie in my host country just to see how different it would taste in London, where they make cottage pies probably much more often than a 17-year-old trying for the first time in the USA. I got this recipe from Recipe 10 Eats.